A lot of this can be explained by the changes in media technology, and thus changes in how the media operates. Back in the early part of the 20th century, Walter Lippmann, a well-known columnist, coined the concept of manufacturing consent. It's a nice phrase, I think, because it describes the essential function of democracy. Democracy manufactures consent. It creates agreement. It's a machine to do that for us. Egyptians are going to have to invent their own version of that machine, but that's basically what a democracy does. It creates a way for us to talk about things and come to an agreement and come to some kind of consensual arrangement. But for the first time, I think, in human history, we now have a multi-billion-dollar industry whose profits and sheer existence depends on fabricating differences. They don't manufacture consent, they manufacture dissent. Dissent is what they feed upon. The moment they allow us to come together, they have failed. Their business model collapses. To the dissent machine, compromise threatens their bottom line. Careers and multi-million-dollar media contracts, and probably a few alimony payments, I suspect, ride on ensuring that they don't find common ground, that we don't find common ground. And while we can complain about that and point out its dangers, I don't think there's anything to be done about it. It's like complaining about the automobile. It's with us. It is not going to go away. I know some on the liberal end of the spectrum talk about wanting to reinstitute the fairness doctrine. I don't think that is workable. In fact, I think any solution that puts government in the position of determining what is and is not fair is not workable. And it contradicts everything that the progressive movement, I think, is supposed to represent. It's tempting to use government in that regard, but I think again, it cannot work, and I think it compromises what the progressive movement is supposed to be about. So if government doesn't control those things, what does? We all know what does. The market does. Thomas Hobbes, the English philosopher, said, in the state of nature, profit is the measure of right. And I think we live today in a state of nature. We live today in an age where it is fashionable to argue that we have no duty to each other, or that whatever small duty we might have can be discharged by pursuing our own goals as selfishly as possible. That's how we help everybody else out, is by making ourselves as rich as possible. That idea is as strange to me as the idea that Barack Obama is a Muslim plant. If you look back at human history, every major system of moral thought and ethics concocted in the past 3,000 years has been predicated on the idea of justice and of what we owe to each other as fellow human beings. Different religions and come at it different ways, but that's what they're all trying to achieve. That's the goal. And that somehow has been lost now. We are instead instructed to think of human beings purely in market terms, as a machine or a factor of production, whose value can be judged most accurately by how much he or she produces. That's the sole value of merit, sole measure of merit. And that economic valuation machine, known as the market, is telling many of our fellow Americans, perhaps many of us here in this room tonight, that they aren't worth very much. It's not just our homes that have lost value. It is not just our earning power that has been diminished. By the gauge of the age, it is our own value as human beings that has diminished. So I think it's important to keep that in mind as you look back at all the things we've talked about so far tonight. At global warming, at the concept of Obama as a foreign interloper, at this irrational fear of an ever-growing federal government, at the bigotry and suspicion directed at Muslim Americans and at other immigrant groups. None of the claims is rational, and trying to confront them on a rational basis is hopeless. If a person doesn't come to a a mindset or a set of opinions through rationality, they can't be argued out of them by rationality either. You have to dig a little deeper and figure out what it is, where they're coming from. What's it really about? The debate about global warming is not really about global warming. It's not, again, about the scientific data. So what is the common thread there? What is the common thread that we go from a cabal of scientists trying to destroy capitalism, you got a treacherous president, fascist governments, the Islamic law being imposed on the United States of America. What's the thread that goes through there? I think the thread that you can pull through all those things is a fear that someone is out to take things that our fellow Americans hold most precious. It's a form of paranoia, but at one level, it is a justified paranoia. These people are correct. Their fortunes are changing. Our fortunes are changing. Their children might not live as well as they have. For the first time in American history, I think that is true. America's status as a superpower, something that we all grew up with as just part of our self-image as a country. I think that is now coming to an end. So all these fears are melting, are bubbling down there, and they're valid. But because we can't and won't honestly talk about them, I think, they tend to erupt like monsters in a nightmare, and they take forms that are unrecognizable to us. Now, I can't stand here and tell you that I have the answer to that. I don't. All I know how to do is to keep talking about the real things, not the imagined things. I think we have to keep engaging. We can't let the machine of dissent divide us brother from brother, parent from child, friend from friend. We can't lose faith and allow that conversation to end. But I'm afraid that some are already ready to do so. Earlier this week, the editor of one of the major liberal journals up in Washington wrote a long essay explaining why it's time for liberals to just abandon the South. He says it's unwinnable. The divorce is final, he says. The Democratic Party can happily ignore the South in its political strategy. I don't believe that. Writing off the South means writing off, I think, the white working class all over the country. It means ending that conversation. It means cutting Southern black voters adrift to fend for themselves. You're on your own out there. Can't help you. But most important, I think it means that we don't try anymore to bridge those gaps of understanding that have come to divide us. I don't accept that. I don't buy surrender as a tactic. And I think if we needed a reminder, we got one this week in Egypt. Difficult as it may be sometimes, we cannot cede the square. We cannot leave the square. We have to defend the square. Thank you.
I feel like we need a moment of silence. I think I need one. I couldn't help but think while he was speaking, why are we here? And all of us are going to have a different answer. But I knew why I was here. And we need this perspective. We need to put things into perspective. We all have our own issues and the things that we work on. And then that just gives us a platform from which to work, right? So I am going to tell you a little bit how this is going to work. We're going to have a very great response, and then we're going to have question and answer. And this is going to be no mics. It's kind of a free-for-all. You stand up, raise your hand, and I'll call on you. But before then, I'm really excited to introduce Andeshay Narai. That's kind of right. And I'm excited because it's a very interesting perspective that comes from him. You may know him from Don't Panic, Your War Answers Questioned, and the Creative Loafing, the column that came out every week. I learned a lot in those columns because he had a very satirical, funny, sarcastic, but yet very informative way of talking about U.S. foreign policy and world affairs. So while he was poking and prodding at the government and foreign policy for almost 10 years, he really gained a lot of recognition. He was winning every year the Creative Loafing Reader's Pick for Best Columnist every year consecutively until 2010. And you may know him also, for those of you who remember, he wrote the article on Bobby Paul and named her the least influential, one of the least influential people in Atlanta. One of 11, and she was number 2. She almost got number 1, but it was really dry that year, and the Rainmaker, who danced a while, you know, he won the least influential. Couldn't make it rain. But we've known Andeshay for quite a while.
You need to tell him what I couldn't do.
She couldn't stop the Iraq War.
Right.
Sorry. Yeah, that's right. And that's kind of true in that sense. He's also the author of a new book that's coming out in July, which I'm kind of excited about. It's called Americapedia, Taking the Dumb Out of Freedom. And and listen to this. It's aimed at teenagers who want to know more about the day-to-day workings of the U.S. government. And it's a unique blend of humor and information, which is a cross between a textbook and a satire. So Andeshay comes with a lot of perspective, and we're very excited to have him for the first time at the Real State of the Union to respond to Jay's very powerful talk. So here you go. The floor is yours.
Still turned on, so see how close we can get it. Whoa.
Testing.
I'll talk in my deep voice.
Jay's over your left shoulder.
Always to the left of me, Jay. Thank you. Maybe I'll just grab it anyway. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. That was, I'm sure you can see under the lights that I'm blushing. It's nice to see so many unveiled women here tonight. That's just touches my Middle Eastern heart. I know politics, Jay, is supposed to have a new civilized tone, but you kind of screwed me over because you wrote a speech that I largely agree with. So since I can't attack on the merits, I'm just going to have to make personal attacks. Jay Jerkman. All right. Responding to the State of the Union is a thankless task. Just ask Bobby Jindal, and Paul Ryan, and Michelle Bachmann. Like Michelle Bachmann, I largely will not be looking you in the eye while I give the speech, because I have it written here. Most of them are not a very good speaker, but anyway. In the spirit of debate, though, I did. Jay kindly shared a good bit of the themes of his speech with me, which I'll be selling copies of after this show. But he shared with me so that I had a chance to respond. And so earlier this evening, I put on a pot of delicious Kenyan anti-colonial Marxist blend. And, had a couple cups of it, and I dug into the speech, and It's true. I do agree with Jay for the most part, but I